So the purpose of this video is to capture our doing together of part 1 of assignment 2, in which we develop the UML diagram, which you're going to forward generate your Java code from. So first of all, let's pay attention. Sorry guys, I just have to close the window. Somebody's using a lawnmower or something in the background. It's very irritating. I'll be back in a second. All right, so our code now is very simple. We basically have these numbers, and in terms of the input, you can just hard code the input into your Java program. So here's what our requirement's going to look like. It's going to be very simple, but everything is simple really in the end. So how we will write our Java program. Because that's the big stumbling part. Even when we do this together, when we're together in the class, 90% of the trouble is just getting you to the point where you can get started. Because once you get started, it's always easy to keep going from there, right? So your Java web service is going to charge a credit card of a traveler that made a reservation for a particular trip. So either we have two use cases here. So use case A is customer presents a valid credit card, and use case 2 is they present an invalid credit card. So client presents a valid credit card number, which is pretty simple. It's just going to be one of these. So you can just use a string .equals or something in Java. Or use case B, they present any other number. Client presents any number which is not on this list. Now we have another design question, which is how exactly are we going to relate with the user? And we're going to see that. I don't know at this point if we're probably not going to get started on the SOAP stuff this time, because I wanted to make sure you guys were primed with the good design thinking to get started. I will actually give you the starter template code for the user interface, because at an introductory level it might be a bit hard to develop that. But let's write out our use cases first of all. So here's our use cases. In fact, let's make this as a table. Maybe that's easier to keep organized for you. So what do we need for our use cases? Actor, goal, and scenario. So let's do that. Remember, I'm doing this very slowly, one step at a time, because I want you guys to get into the way of thinking about how to do this. This is not a hard problem. The algorithm is very simple, but the methodology is the important part here. The methodology of starting to design. Actually, let's write that out here. So learning outcome. The methodology of constructing a software application. So actor in both cases is user who wants to book a trip, right? So our application user, and also the database, because the database is always an actor. And the goal in both cases, I mean, you see what I say, right? This is very simple. To book a trip by providing a credit card number to pay for it. Even just the act of how you articulate the description of what you're trying to get to is a very important initial starting step in terms of how we get it done. I know when we're together in class, when I do this, when I'm kind of facilitating the lab in person, student says, Peter, I don't know what to do. And I say, okay, you tell me in simple words what you're trying to do. They say, well, I don't really know. And then my answer is, okay, here's a pen and a paper. Write down in clear, simple terms exactly what you're trying to do. And once you've done that, the problem will solve itself. How to write clear intention statements to base our algorithm on. Right? Intention, that means what are you trying to do? Because we said over here, and we've been saying it since week 1, so keep this slide handy. So the analysis phase, well, we pretty much, it's been given to us. Here we're not doing the analysis. They've already told us what we want to do, collect a credit card number and validate it. That's really all we're doing. Design phase, so now we're making the UML, and implementation, that's going to be your job to write the code. And we said here that in the design phase, we think in terms of intentionalities. We want to know what to do, so we can add another point here, which is write your intentionality statements. Write your statements of what you're trying to do. So let's wrap it up. I don't think it'll take longer than that. So goal is to validate, and in fact, in both cases, for both use cases, the goal is actually the same, right? Approve transaction if a valid credit card number is presented. But remember what we said when we were studying unified process. If we have, there's one goal per use case, right? There's one goal per use case. So if we just have one goal, we only really have one use case here. That's what I was trying to lead you to. So in both cases, the goal was the same, so there's only one use case here. So that means we just have one. So we can get rid of this thing, and now we can say the implementation or the scenario. And why I took you through this little bit of a roundabout way is because I guarantee if we were in class and if I gave you each a paper worksheet and I made you do this by yourself, approximately 100% of the class would say there are two use cases here. So to sort of draw that out, because we're not working together, I just wanted to show you how to, this is where the rubber hits the road, right? Now we're no longer thinking what unified process is. Now we're seeing how we actually use it. So you have one use case per goal, per intentionality. So the scenario is approve transaction if and only if, right? IFF is a term for math. Approve transaction if and only if provided credit card number is in this list. So that means we do not have a use case B. We just have one use case. So that's pretty simple. So client presents a credit card number. We have to validate it. So that's pretty much your design statement. It's not more complicated than this. How do we write that out as UML? Well, let's go over to our paper now. Let's go over to our kind of virtual whiteboard, which is our piece of paper. First of all, does anybody have any questions or not sure? By the way, everything I've done so far, have I said anything complicated yet? The answer is no. Everything I've done, you kind of should have been able to do by yourself, but a lot of the times I think students make themselves frightened. They freeze up. They think, oh, it's too complicated. Do you understand now that this is not a complicated program? Everything we've done, you actually could have done by yourself, no problem, if you would have kept your wits about you and if you would have just thought through it carefully. So now let's go and see how we're going to do this, right? So get our paper over here. How many UML entities do I have here? Ayush, what's your opinion? Jump in and share with classmates. How many UML entities do I have here? Deirdre, what's your opinion? What do you think? It'll be much more satisfying to you if you guess, even if you're not right. Well, who really cares, right? Because the goal is not to be right. The goal is to build your thinking skills. Tanya, what do you think? What's your, oh, I have a new message coming in. 2, all right, let's think about that. Maybe, let's think about it. So what do we need to make our system work? Well, first of all, what do we know for a fact? We know we're doing model view controller implementation. We know we're doing a model view controller implementation. If anybody knows a better way to do this, let me know. I've been doing this since before you were born, and I'm telling you it is going to be model view controller. It's not going to be client server, which, I mean, model view controller is sort of a superset of client server, but anyway, we won't go into that right now. So I need a POI. I need a POI, a point of interface. So we're going to model that. Remember last week we talked about the mediator pattern. I kicked out a video. You can go and watch my video. Mediator pattern. So we're going to use the mediator pattern to model our POI. To UML model our POI. Our web, it's going to be a web interface in this case. That's the view. And we also need a database, and that's going to be another UML object. And I need another UML entity to model my controller, which is where, what do I do in the controller? I put my algorithms and business processes there. So for your work next week, you don't have to design the database, although you should design the data store, right? You should design the data schema. So you have two things to do for next week. Write your Java code to implement the controller and write the data schema, write the SQL table design to implement your data store. So for part one, 2 pieces of work. Do write the Java code to take an input, and for your program next week, you can just have an input variable, right? You can just have like a dummy test set, which is 1, or you can make an array. Actually, let's do it this way. Write the Java code to implement the controller. Since we don't have a UI yet, make an array of 10 numbers, half of which observe the pattern and half of which do not. Ten strings containing credit card numbers. So some of those observe the correct pattern. And some are not the correct pattern. And you know how to use equals, right? If you don't, now to do the basic Java, just kick me an email. I can help you out with that. But you guys have taken level 1 Java. I don't think that's a very complicated Java programming problem. And again, if you need help, let me know. I'll jump in there and I'll help you with the code. Some of those are the correct pattern and some are not. So for now, just output a message. So your program should look at each string, should evaluate the pattern, and should output a correct or incorrect message. Just use system.out.println and say good or bad, you know, it's valid or invalid. For each input, output, so for each input value, output like a pass or fail message. So the other thing, also design the data schema. If you want to use SQL, I think that's simple. If you want to use Mongo, be my guest and use it. Design the data schema to make your application work, to support your controller code. Write the data schema, which is the model. To support the operation of your controller. And a simple paper-based description would be good enough. So you're going to hand in one document, one Word document per team. With your Java code to implement your controller. And a description, right? If you want to draw it out on a piece of paper and take a picture and upload the picture, that's the way I would do it. If you want to describe it using tables in a Word document, that's fine. Describe your schema for your model. All right, I'm going to end my little screencast video now because it's 11 o'clock, which is, I think, the end.